We all know the goal.
From inside the centre square, Boy's kicked the goal! Boy's kicked the goal! From inside the centre.
I was going to say you're probably sick of it. I'm sure you're probably not sick of it.
Not sick of it. I started to think about what it actually, Spuds game meant to me, immense positive impact that footy has on community across Australia. Because there's only two questions. How are we going to get this deal done? And how are we going to manage the trade? Literally all Pickers sent me was, it's done. No updates or anything. So I'm freaking out like, what's done? My career?
Now, the man sitting opposite us, D, I'm forever indebted to him, actually.
You can see the excitement
I
bubbling over.
know, I'm going to try my hardest not to be I know you think I'm the biggest nuffy in the world. This man, I'm going to die a happy man because of this man. Tom Boyd, welcome to the dos&d show.
Yes, Tom.
I didn't know it was this type of podcast.
It's not Boyd.
No one actually alluded to the Bulldogs fraternity here, so I'm glad I'm amongst friends. Not that many of us, but growing.
Yes.
At least they say they're
I know. Well, that's what we say.
We've heard that message for 20 years.
Yeah, there's something happening out west.
Yeah, we've heard that for a long time, mate. We will promise that the actual dogs and nuffs that we will get to all the good stuff. But as the show goes on, because we've heard a lot about your story over the years. I think everyone's familiar with the grand final, a lot of post footy. But we actually wanted to start maybe even pre-draft, which we typically don't do on this show. But for those that may not be that familiar with that side of your story, can you take us probably to your 16 or 17-year-old self?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne in a place called Ringwood North. About as stereotypical upbringing as you can imagine. Father was a sparky, mum worked in a school. Spent all my childhood playing sport. Predominantly basketball and football, but I sort of touched everything else along the way as you do when you're a kid. And I really sort of got to the stage around 15 where playing basketball at the state level alongside sort of Ben Simmons and Dante Exum. So Dante is my age, Ben's a year younger, and I always say this when I do public events. They've both gone on to great things overseas playing in the NBA, and in Ben's case, he dated a Kardashian, which is far beyond my capabilities. Though obviously I have my lovely wife. And I was also captain of Victoria at the same time. So between those two things, you're doing sort of 12, 13 sessions of sport a week. And it's before school, after school. It was all the time. And I was obviously trying to manage my schooling at Luther College as well. So very much a sporting person. Got to the stage then when I really was looking forward to, what do I want to do, not only from a sport point of view, but from a career point of view. And football was always in the back of my mind the thing that I wanted to do most. But the thing with basketball, especially in Victoria, probably more so in Australia, is it's very difficult to be flexible with basketball, whereas footy's the opposite. Footy's like, yeah, just go train there, just turn up and play on the weekend. Whereas basketball's like every session or you don't qualify for this team. Anyway, I could say a few more things about basketball and the issues with it. But anyway, I basically got to a point where I was like, no, I want to play footy. And a big part of it was, my dad's my hero, always has been. He was a sort of suburban footballer, but larger than life figure for me, and really wanted to make him proud. And he was, I think his basketball career got cut short after a lifetime ban fighting or something. And so I started playing footy really full time at that stage, around 15, 16. I was obviously already playing, but really started to focus on it. And then went through the sort of under 17s, 18s year, through the TAC Cup as it was called back then with the Eastern Rangers. Won a national championship as a bottom age player, played in the state side with sort of the Viney, Whitfield age group as a bottom age player, and then sort of went into the sort of draft year in 2013 as one of the very likely touted number one picks by that stage, but really sort of took the world by storm in the first 5 or 6 weeks before getting injured and missing a big chunk of the year, and then getting picked up by the Giants at the end of that season.
You mentioned your parents. You've been so well spoken ever since you even first stepped foot in the AFL industry. You've always been pretty well renowned to being very respectful, well worded, great manners. Where did you learn that? Is that something your parents always pushed, like to really respect everyone that comes your way? Yeah,
so mum's Danish. So essentially mum and dad met backpacking when they were 24 or 5 in Portugal. So dad was travelling from Australia, or Faulkner, more specifically, which is basically Boydy. Big shift from Boydy to the clean streets of Copenhagen. And they met, and then sort of dad followed her back to Denmark, came back here, went over there. So mum came over as a sort of 27-year-old married dad and moved over here. And her very big push in our childhood, and even to this day, though it's less effective, I would say, is manners are really, really important. The way that you communicate and treat people is absolutely paramount. Whereas Dad's always been big on respect, but also sort of grew up in the school of hard knocks, so had a bit of a different flavour. So I definitely had that from Mum. And then look, I think, the biggest thing that Mum and Dad said to me as I went through this sporting journey was, hey, school is absolutely important. If your sport causes your schooling to suffer, we're going to pull you out. I don't know how serious they were, but I took it seriously. And so I always did quite well in school, and I really had sort of a great group of friends who did well at school as well at Luther College, and in particular with reference to the speaking and communicating side of things, I got 46 or 7 in English and was always good at writing and interested in reading as well. So I find it's something that most people think is too difficult to learn. And I think that because there's obviously a fear of doing it publicly in particular, which I do 100 or so events a year, there's like a reluctance to go and try. But more and more what I see, particularly with, say, the younger generation, is the difference between those who exceed expectations and really excel is those who can communicate effectively. And it's not about being a public speaker, but it's just about being able to carry your thoughts and your concerns and give and receive feedback. And some of those things you learn in footy, but being able to sort of apply it to a broader spectrum of people is really critical. So something I encourage everyone to go and do. You boys have obviously figured out how to do it on a microphone. I can't imagine you thought you were going to be any good when you first started, but now look at you.
Well, thank you.
I don't know if we're there yet, but thank you.
Well, you're never there. That's the point, right? Otherwise, you stop improving. But certainly for me, it's been something that's been really, really important. And I think one of the things that's really hard when you're playing footy is it's very hard to find your voice because there are so many people telling you what to say and how to say it and not to say things at all. And I think this is probably where the misconception of media training comes in. Like, oh, everyone's media trained. You must be media trained because you can speak in front of a microphone or a camera. I'm not media trained. None of the boys were media trained. But the way that it essentially came through is, here's the talking points, here's what not to say.
Don't say this, mate.
And I certainly felt during my career that I had so much pressure on me as a player with the contract and the number one pick and later the premiership and all that sort of stuff that I wasn't able to go out and just be myself, which I found really difficult, particularly in retrospect. So now being able to actually get up, have some fun, talk in front of people, share some stories and the insights and those type of things is one of the things that I love to do most.
I'd love to see his first speech compared to even the speech he did the other night at Spuds game. The comparison, because that was amazing. That was you were incredible. But the first speech, what was that like? Getting up for the first time.
It went really, really well.
Okay, all right, well, that's good.
But the preparation drastically different, right? So it's actually 2 really good examples. So Spuds game a couple of weeks ago, and then my first ever proper speaking gig was at Westbourne Grammar, which is out in Werribee. It's really quite a great school. And in preparation for it, so I hate speaking with notes. I find it really limiting, particularly when you're talking about things that are personal to you or issues that might be personal to the audience, is you feel like as an audience member you're being spoken at rather than to. So the way that I prepared for my first one was, and I remember it like it was yesterday, I wrote like a 4,000 word speech and I memorised the whole thing, right? It was just nailed it. Did it for 4 weeks leading into this thing. And I drove to Werribee and I was parked across the road in a side street and I tried to get through the first paragraph and I couldn't get through it. I couldn't get through any of it. I'm like, I'm going to have to...
What are we going to do here?
Oh, mate, I had no idea. There was like 250 kids going. And I was like, do I just call my manager and fake a sickie?
Oh, wow.
And of course, like, you get that feeling. I'm very well versed in that feeling of sort of anxiousness around performance and wanting to do it. It was something that obviously happened a lot through my career. So I said, we'll just see how we go. So I threw caution to the wind, went out there. And of course, because I'd done so much preparation, I knew what I was going to say. And what I've always found is, in particular, once I get up on stage in front of, audiences from the 65,000 at Spuds game or, 25 people in a sort of more function-based event, once I'm up there and I can see the audience and connect with them, and in particular if I've spent time learning about who they are as people before I go up there, it's never an issue. So the first one went quite well. I got it recorded and it really kicked off much of the speaking stuff that I do today. Now, conversely, when I was preparing for Spuds game, I think people would consider that speaking for 45 minutes is harder than speaking for 2. Not the case. Speaking for 2 is way harder.
Yeah.
Much less room for error. If you spill one word in a 2-minute talk, it's like 10% of the words that are said. So it's a really quite a high stakes environment. So my preparation for that was, one, they sent me like a script and I was like, I'm not doing that. That doesn't make any sense. Like it was just talking points to build off basically. So then I thought about what I wanted to say. I started to think about what it actually, Spuds game meant to me, what footy means to me more broadly, because I think there's a a critique of footy that vastly overlooks the immense positive impact that footy has on community across Australia. And we could talk a bit about that further.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, the mental health round has been a big thing of discussion recently. So then my preparation then went into, okay, well, this is a different environment. And environment is so big when it comes to speaking, because if you are in a room where the stage is in the wrong spot, or there's people who are eating whilst you're talking, like all this stuff, like I've learned over the years, I'm like, if you do that, I'm not talking, because it just ruins the event.
Yeah.
And as an organizer, particularly if you're not like an events organizer, it's something you don't even consider. So that's what the role of a speaker is, essentially to help guide the event to be the best success as possible. So I called an MC friend of mine, Pete Laser, who does a lot of work with WorkSafe with me. And I said, anything I need to know? He goes, yep, don't listen to yourself. He goes, you're not going to be able to hear a thing. And I'm like, okay. You walk out to the MCG, Chelsea speaks first, you've got all these players, umpires around you, and it's so loud, the echo in the middle of the ground, that you can't hear yourself. So you have to speak in a cadence and in a quality and in an accuracy point of view that doesn't have any errors. And I'd never done that before. So I was doing an event in Elmore with WorkSafe on the Thursday night before the Friday, and I was driving home sort of 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, the best way to practice for this, I'm going to turn the radio up really loud and practice that way. And I don't typically prepare like that for events, but it was the way that I did it. So I think, considering I tried doing it one way, it didn't work 400 and so events ago. And now getting a completely different event, you sort of just work through the process of what you need to accomplish and take in the variables and understand the environment you're going to be walking into and trying to make the best of it.
No, it's great insight. Actually relates, I think, a lot to us and some of the on a much smaller scale that we've probably experienced in the last 12 months or so. But going back, so like we said off the top, I think we're really fascinated with some of the Giants stuff because it's probably less talked about. I'd love to hear your initial thoughts and what you saw when you walked into the Giants for the first time. What was the club like? Because we hear stories, but I'd love to know what through your eyes, what you saw.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to understand about the Giants at that time is that it was the complete opposite of what I'd left. Right? Yeah. So I'd been, even the Eastern Rangers, which is not really a community club. Obviously, it's part of the talent pathway. But comparatively to a lot of the other TAC Cup clubs who have a lot of schoolboys playing for them, it's much more of a community club because we only had one or two leave us every year, whereas, say, Oakley and Sandy might have 15 to 20 of their best 22 go off and play school footy for 10 rounds. So we had people who'd been at the Eastern Rangers all year round forever, right? These legends of the club. And the boys that were there, many of us had been there for, 3 or 4 years, and it was sort of starting to build into what this club actually meant. So we were successful in that final year. We go from finishing bottom in 2012 at the Eastern Rangers, 17 bottom age players, really only a couple of bright points in me and one or two of the other sort of top age players.
Who were a couple of those boys?
Brandon Wood was the captain at that time.
So he went and played VFL?
He played VFL. Mitch O'Donnell played VFL. He was a gun, like one of the greatest, I don't say local footballers disparagingly, the way I've always described it is he's got tradie hands. He could tackle you with his pinky. Right? He had the hardest hands I've ever seen in my life, right? And he was a tradie then, right, when he was 15 and 16. So there was a couple of good boys. Mitch Honeychurch ended up getting drafted. He was a bottom age player with me. Ben Cavara obviously ended up getting drafted later. Dan McStay didn't play a lot in our bottom age year, but obviously he's gone on to great things at Collingwood. But in that sort of bottom age year, bit of a rough patch for Eastern. Flip that to 2013, we win the premiership. We beat, your mob, the Stingrays, by 20 goals in the grand final. I missed 15 weeks with an ankle injury that I did over in Perth in the state carnival. And anyway, my point being is that it was quite a strong, tight-knit community club, and I'd come from Norwood, which was as close a club as I can ever imagine. Dad's got his photo on the wall. I'd been there since I was 2 years old. This is who I am as a person, suburban footballer. And I walk into the Giants. There's 20 first-round picks. We're in the underground training rooms of the old athletics centre at Sydney Olympic Park, and we're living in the Truman Show at Breakfast Point, right? And Breakfast Point, greatly misunderstood concept. People thought we were living in the country club.
That's what we exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
they always put up that same photo. It was the country club. There's 10,000 people that by the time Breakfast Point was done, we'll be living in that suburb. But it did kind of look like 45 of us were living in the same house. Not the case. Having said that, I was living with Josh Kelly and obviously the recently departed Cam McCarthy as the three of us first years. For those of you who don't know about Josh obviously came from Brighton. Not sure he had much of a clue how to cook and clean. I didn't either. Like, we were both really prolific sports people growing up, so we had a lot of time on the road and travelling and training or whatever. And Cam was from South Freo or something like that, and he was trying to figure it all out as well. Then, you've got 3 or 4 different people in the apartments downstairs. You run into people in your own, like, private shopping centre every single day. Like, it was just so, like, in your face. Like, I didn't know anyone else in Sydney except for Giants people, and I'd run into them inadvertently. So that was very strange. I was in a city that didn't have footy. Strange again. I was also in a club that had all brand new assistant coaches. They'd never done the job before. They're all ex-legends of the game. Luke Power, James McDonald, Chad Corns, Dean Brogan, like these superstar footballers, right? But assistant coach is a really different job. Then you had young leaders in Cal Ward and Phil Davis, at the time, Tom Scully. You had all these young guys trying to figure it out, and a lot of us really struggling to find our feet. And I think all of that is to say that it was such an experiment at the time that you can see the success that they've had in recent years, which in my mind is very tantamount to 2 things. One, the leadership of the likes of Toby Green and the cohort who've come through with him, Stephen Caniglio and all those guys. And also the fact that it's matured into being a footy club, which it wasn't when I was there. And I think that was a large portion of probably what was overlooked. Like, yes, I left to obviously come back for a big contract. I wanted to come back to Victoria. But I wasn't having a difficult choice leaving the Giants at that stage because it wasn't in a position to say, this is a great club to play at.
Yeah.
We finished on the bottom of the ladder and all the things that I just described.
Hope you're enjoying this great episode with Tom Boyd. We'll be right back to the episode in just a second. But first, a quick word from our friends at Fleet Plan Hire Solutions. Dos?
If you listen to dos&d every week, you know for a fact that Fleet have supported us since the very start. We can't thank them enough. Fleet Plan Hire are the #1 earth-moving company in the nation.
That's right.
They're huge. And we couldn't do the show without them. And I know so many other big projects couldn't do those without them.
I think that's all we really need to say. Visit fph.com.au for more information now. Let's get back into the episode with Tom Boyd. With, just quickly, Josh Kelly was a high draft pick. What was Cam McCarthy?
He was pick 14, I think.
So, and I don't know what... When you're living in a situation like that with 3 of you, it's probably all over the papers you're the highest paid.
But
out of
it was sort of so my first contract was $69,000.
Oh, as a number 1 draft pick.
Yeah, and you got like everyone loves the cost of living. I think I got like a bump for the cost of living allowance, which was like 10% or whatever it was at that stage. And then you get a couple of things for being number 1. As in,
thanks to NAB.
Yeah, the NAB thing.
Yeah.
Investment portfolio. wasn't that. That was just here you go. And then you basically games played. So Josh would have ended up getting paid more than me in my first year.
Because the only reason I assume, because I could be wrong. I thought now there's a bit of a first round, second round, third round.
Yeah, all first rounders get the same base salary, I think, back then, with slight differences like between the first start and the end of. But it's not a lot, like maybe 3 or 4 grand.
The reason I ask is because in an environment where you go to a normal workplace, and you could speculate what everybody's on, but in a footy club where it's sometimes public, and you're probably more to this when you get to the Dogs, and we'll touch on that. But what's it like in an environment where there's almost tiers of players being paid differently, especially in a young group where everybody's pretty much at the same level and at the same starting point? Is there comments daily about this sort of stuff? Is there, I'd just love to know what it's like.
Yeah, it's a good question. Firstly, it's different in the workforce now. Like this, you have to share kind of thing. There's different rules and stuff around it. But it's part and parcel of Aussie rules football. I think the thing I think that's a symptom of what I would sort of argue is the bigger issue that the Giants had at the time, which was if I walk into any footy club in the AFL now as the #1 pick, let's say I get picked up in 2025, there's a huge likelihood I'm the only #1 pick there. Yep. And there is an even bigger likelihood that I'm the only one that they've had maybe ever. Or even in the last 10 years, right? Whereas when I walked into the Giants, there was Tom Scully, Lockie Whitfield, John Patton and myself, 4 #1 picks. Right? Not to mention the droves of #2s and 3s and 5s and 7s and whatever. And all that is to say that one of the things that young high draft picks have is twofold. One, they're very talented at football, typically. Talented in the very least in the mould of football that they came from, because senior footy to junior footy is very different. Number two is they're all very impatient, because they all want to succeed and excel really quickly, because that's what high draft picks, that's what got them to where they are, and that's what will continue to get them to be better. But they're also usually incredibly insecure, because they have that impatience and that desire to succeed quickly, and they're usually questioning their own capability for the first ever time when they walk into an AFL club, because that's when you're at the biggest disadvantage. First pre-season is like 50% of the games that you have to make physically are done in that first preseason. You're so far away. Now, there's exceptions to that with the guys like Josh Kelly, who are just extraordinarily good endurance athletes, of course. But all that is to say, to answer your question specifically, is there was a bit of a culture at the time, I would say, at least what I experienced, of I've got to beat the other guy next to me.
Yeah.
Which sort of exists in a controlled way in all good clubs, but it's usually managed by the leaders of the club, the coach, the culture, the history, and the fact that it's been done slowly over time rather than everyone just jump in all at the same stage.
Yep.
And I thought that brought out a few things. One, like a sort of sinister, if I just make it harder for the guy next to me, that I felt was the case in a few examples. Two, I'm not going to make it easier. Obviously the inverse of that first comment. And then there's also can you believe what he's getting paid? Because, he hasn't even got a kick. And in a lot of cases, like, there's a crosstown discount, there's a crosstown bonus applied to guys coming to a not established club, coming to the Western Sydney, coming to a club that hadn't won any games. Like, there's all these things that mean that it's harder to recruit players and they pay more. And there were certainly examples of that at the time. So yes, it's a challenge. It's one of the few really big changes that happen when you first get drafted, particularly as a high draft pick and someone who's expected to play early and those types of things.
There's one thing that probably not a lot of people know about that comes with the pressure of being the number one draft pick, which is being on the face of a Gatorade bottle.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Now, this is something probably no one really knew about, but for yourself, it took a bit of time to play your first game because you'll come back injured.
Yeah, 5 rounds, I think. It was around 5 or 6 I played.
You'd hurt your ankle the year before. Had surgery. Oh no, you didn't have surgery.
They had like 6 key forwards, one of which is still
True.
like the best key forward in the game. So that doesn't help.
But the names on these, there might have been four different names on the Gatorade on different Gatorade bottles. Who were the names? And then you're put alongside them.
I think it was Scott Pendlebury, who hadn't played like almost 400 games then, to be fair. Pretty good
Premiership
career.
player at that stage.
Pretty good career. I think it was that bald guy who played at Gold Coast for a while, Gary Ablett. And then there was also that guy who kicked 1,000 goals for Swans, Buddy Franklin, which all was okay until Gatorade decided to send about 1,000 bottles to the Giants change rooms. And it was like, guys, mate, you should have seen I tried to give them all out. I'm like, guys, don't man of the people.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone liked that. I mean, I obviously hadn't sent it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was coming. Like, anyway. But yes, it was one of those many moments where I think the thing that at its core really I struggled with football about was there is a inherent feeling of how much value you have as a person and whether you're a good person, whether you're doing good things, whether you should be respected, liked, or otherwise. And then there was a perceived version of that comes through kicks, marks, handballs, salary, and very publicly facing difficult to control narratives. And those two for me never met eye to eye. And there's not many things in life that are more difficult, particularly if you're how would I say it? Not emotionally driven person, but someone who's very strong in connection with other people, that the sort of starting point that you have with complete strangers, and in some cases your teammates are complete strangers, obviously when you first get there, is this guy's overvalued, overpaid, overinflated in terms of his ego or whatever it was. And look, I'm very happy to take certain criticisms, but they can't all be true at the same time, particularly for people who didn't know me. And the Gatorade example was one very difficult moment of that going, like, I felt incredibly embarrassed to be successful as a 18-year-old kid who should have, like, I didn't even think about it now. I'd thought about that for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's representative of the fact that many of the things that I accomplished during my career, particularly in the early days, I feel almost like I felt ashamed of at the time because the response was difficult for me to handle and in many ways so negative when getting your face on a Gatorade bottle should be like the greatest thing that ever happened to you. This is like what you dream of. I'm pretty sure it's in 2K in the My Player section. You know, you like build up your player and then you're like, you got a Gatorade deal. I'm like, yeah, that was me.
That's true.
I got award points in the
journey.
game, but in life it was like I just got more criticised. So there was many examples of that. Obviously, everything got way more out of control with regards to that sort of things when I signed the big deal to come back to the Bulldogs. But it was just one of those things, trying to match who you are as a person and the publicly facing 2D figure that runs around on a TV with who you are actually at home.
Yep.
It's one of the great challenges that public-facing people have, and I think that's why, obviously, that to the mental health point of view, there's so many people who really struggle in the public eye, and much of that is because there's an assumption as the individual that everyone hates you or feels the same way as the people that you're feeling are expressing to you. So, like the people you run into express a certain set of beliefs about who you are as a person, and you automatically apply that to everyone everywhere. And the other side of the coin is that people don't do a great job of trying to understand that the people running around on the screen on the weekend are actually people.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for them to do so, don't get me wrong, but it was certainly the case with me as a footballer.
When it comes to, you mentioned almost individuals versus team. So you come into a team full of all these high draft picks. You mentioned a few big name forwards competing for spots. Was there ever frustration from other players or even from yourself when you're not getting given the footy, or if there's opportunities where, I'm sure in that 2016 Dogs year, there's moments where you're giving handballs or other players are giving handballs where typically maybe at the Giants that might not happen. Were there moments where, there was disgruntled players at you for potentially, being the number one and not passing it?
Yeah. There's, I think probably the best more systemic example, because this happens everywhere today, but it happened so much more at the Giants based on the sort of list demographic, is there was all these guys who were like, very high picks, brilliant midfielders who just couldn't crack in, right? Because we had sort of Callum Ward running around. Toby was getting like 50 touches a game. There was a few other guys who were really strong in there at the time as well. And what would happen is that those guys would go back and play in the twos, and one of the other big challenges of the Giants is that the NEAFL competition was so far behind the AFL one. Like, when I say, I went from playing at Adelaide Oval in my first game, 50,000 people. I think it was the first Adelaide Oval game that they'd ever played there, maybe, or gone back, maybe since the new stand. We lost by 15 goals, but anyway. And then 3 weeks later, after I got dropped, I was playing in Belconnen, which is outside of Canberra, in 4 inches of mud against a bunch of guys who I think played rugby before.
Yeah.
And so there was big polar differences. But what that obviously bred was then the guys who would come back out of the firsts, or they would stay in the seconds and play in the midfield in particular, they would get 35, 40 touches a game, kick a couple of goals. It was really difficult as a forward because they just run over the top of the midfield on the opposition and just absolutely dominate. This is the Tom Mitchell era.
I was just going to say, not taking anything away from Tom Mitchell, but it sounds like no wonder why he was getting 50 to 60 touches.
He was getting 50. To be fair, he was getting 50 against the Giants as well.
Was he? Yeah, okay.
And there's very few accumulators as good as Tom. And it was sort of very difficult for those guys because once they played, they'd string together 7 or 8 great games, right? 3 votes across the board. Then they'd go, oh, someone's injured or missing a week in the ones. You're coming up to play. Then they'd play them at half forward. And go, you only got 10 touches or 15 touches. Oh, you kicked a goal, good, but you only had 15 touches. You're going back to the twos. And I've never played half forward ever. Right? So that was a really big issue for them. And I think in no small part it meant that the guys who they wanted to keep left over a period of time because it just wasn't the opportunity for enough players. Even in more recent times, you've got the whole Bailey Smith, I didn't get a game in the midfield. That thing's everywhere. And so many of the high picks, particularly if they're smaller guys, are midfielders, and they think very literally about them being midfielders all the time. They don't want to play anywhere else, right? So that was a big issue. But then there was certainly a case, I wrote about in my book, there was one example where we're playing against North Melbourne. I take a mark, I get a free kick, 40 metres out directly in front, and one of my teammates basically runs past, screaming for a handball. And there's a whole group of the whole North Melbourne team was standing next to me. And so I don't handball it. Anyway, I get turned around and he starts abusing me, right, on the field. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
That's so different to what I'd come up with. Not only had I undoubtedly been a bit pampered because I was the number one pick and I was, kicking 5 every week, but I'd never seen it in community footy. I'd never seen it anywhere else. And I think that was just, there was a certain level of, let's play these boys on the edge. so that we can get the best out of them. And I actually don't have any issues with the ex-teammates. I have great respect for the Giants as a club. I think Leon was an unbelievable coach, and I really mean that, Leon Cameron. But at the time, they were in that weird transition period and they were experimenting a little bit about how they get the most out of these boys quick enough. And I think what that led to is, of course, that they built a line that was a bit further than what most clubs are comfortable with. And then you had a few guys who have stepped over that line at different stages. So very different environment to any footy club that I'd ever seen.
Do you, based on these thoughts that we're hearing from you now, if you were involved at all with Tasmania coming in a few years, are there any little, I was about to say micro, but maybe more macro changes you would make or advice you would give based on like even just the footy side of things of how they can retain players or keep players happy or even just how they go about drafting and recruiting?
Yeah, I would spread their list out more than the Giants did because you got to remember, like the Giants, at least from my perspective, the Giants as of they are today is the second coming of them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the next wave of guys. And they seem to have done it much differently in the second wave than they did in the first. And if you look at Gold Coast, this is like the third wave.
Yeah.
Right. They stuffed it up and lost everyone.
Yep.
And really didn't get maximum output out of any of the guys who came through in that first wave. Not to say there's not brilliant players. So please don't take that as criticism. So for me, there's sort of three major aspects that I would recommend for Tassie. I would go really heavy on assistant coaching and senior coaches in that space, senior assistants. So we had guys like Al McConnell who'd been in there forever. He was great. Brett Hand, who was a very, very experienced development coach, fantastic. I wouldn't personally go those brilliant players and use that as the come and play 2 years and then come and coach. I would personally just have some experience in that ranks and then have one or two of them do that model that the Brogans and the likes did. I would also then trade out a lot of those middle round picks to get not brilliant players, but consistent senior players that you can come in and say, hey, this guy's going to be our 10th best player.
Yep.
I'm going to pick 3 or 4 of them to spread the load of growth across senior guys who you pay a lot to bring in, which they will. Then there'll be a cohort of guys who are more like, your meat and potato reliable players, and then you have your brilliance underneath. Because otherwise, the brilliance of the young players gets so diminished with lack of confidence and being targeted and just being exploited athletically or skill-wise or knowledge-wise that you lose some. Tassie's going to be a place they're going to have to continue to sell as a destination because it's cold as shit half the year.
Yeah.
And it's a small market. So they need to make it an experience that looks like it's going to be sustainable and successful. And if you ask any player, players won't leave and take no money for success because obviously there's the rest of life to think about. But they certainly will not go somewhere if they don't think success is on the cards because they just know how painful the experience is going to be for a long period of time. So you've got to sell the dream that this is going to be something that's going to be enjoyable from day one. And ideally within the first 5 or 6 years is going to be something where they're contending for success.
That made me almost just want to bounce straight to the Dogs chat. But one more. What was Leon's biggest? Did he ever give you a big spray at all throughout your time at the Giants? Was there a moment where he had to pull you into his office or have a chat or?
There was a few. He did it with everyone. It was so scary. It was so funny.
Dos said that this morning at coffee.
He's
said, "Gee, I'm
terrifying.
scared of him."
He's so intense and so
Yeah.
smart, and had just done it right. Like he'd been at the Dogs for 17 or 18 years, coaching or playing. Like
Rocket, we can't think.
no. And the worst part with Leon. Why, player X, did you miss that kick? It's such an easy kick. Here you go. And he'd just show you in runners, no warm up.
Oh, no.
Because he's such a brilliant kick of the footy, both feet, right? Just lay someone out 40 minutes. It's easy, boys. And then you'd be like, oh, hard to argue.
Yeah.
So it's always more difficult with guys that can do it, right? But yeah, there was a few. I mean, like I remember one of the like less than proud moments of my first year of the Giants was, and I don't know how much of this was imagined versus real, because my retrospective viewers are probably a little bit of both. But I remember playing some really good footy in the twos, and then like never talking to the coaches. Like they just moved on. It was like 5 or 6 weeks where they're like, all right, we tried Tom once. We'll just let him develop in the twos. And it didn't matter how well I played. Like my perception at the time, again, this is all my opinion, was, are you going to talk to me about the potential of play? And look, to be fair, this happened at the Bulldogs at different stages. This happens at all footy clubs. And one of the big things that I'm always critical of is coaches go, let's spend 3 hours in match committee talking about 3 players.
Yeah.
That's all they do.
Yeah, I
And
don't
that
get
happens,
it.
all that happens is they all talk about it. The coach goes, all of these guys around the room, give me your opinion. And then he goes, I'm just going to go with this guy.
Yeah.
And that's all. It's like, it's
I'm the
such,
head coach. I'm choosing.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I've spoken to
This decision's
assistants and
already
stuff
made.
over the years. And like, they're really like, there's obviously some process that's in
For
there
sure.
and scenarios and all that sort of stuff. I'm not diminishing the need for
No.
match committee. But my issue is that there's 20 guys, maybe not 20, there's 15 guys who think they're a chance almost every week, delusionally or otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's so important to go, here's why you're not in, here's where you're tracking. Let's have a 5-minute chat with everyone, and then let's have a 20-minute chat once a month, right? Just to keep you on the right track. Guy, I'm still considering you. We're still watching every game you play in the twos. We still see you growing. This still needs to improve. And it's more that, and that doesn't happen to happen from the head coach, but it has to happen sort of
Somewhere.
logically from the assistant coaches. And the head coach should touch base all the time. I'm a big believer in that. And I felt at the time that so I was like, I remember saying a couple of snide remarks to Al McConnell and I'm like, oh, yeah, still remember me?
Yeah.
And, in a way, squeaky wheels tend to get a bit more attention. So I don't regret it from that point of view. But it did sound very much entitled. I remember Leah pulling me in and like, mate, you haven't played well enough. Like, you're not going to get picked until you play well enough. I'm like, okay.
You can at least say g'day, mate.
Yeah, and it was there was another thing that happened at the time, which was an absolute crock, which was I remember an article getting leaked that my dad was coaching me somehow. I'm like, for starters, Dad's got a full-time business he's running, and he's in Melbourne. When do you reckon we're squeezing these extra coaching sessions in? And I would happily talk about it now if that was the case. And Dad never ever said anything to me from when we watched footy or talked about how I played. He never said anything about how the game should be played. He never said anything about the team. He was very, very strict on this. And the simplest example is I remember we played this game against Ballarat in the under-18s when I was bottom age. We kicked 1 goal for the day, which I kicked. We lost by 100 points, and it rained. It was 7 degrees the whole day. It was absolutely horrendous. And I remember getting in the car with him to go home, and I said, mate, our midfielders are rubbish. Like, if they could just get the ball to me, like I can do something. And he goes, did you play a perfect game? I'm like, what? I'm whinging. Listen to me. He goes, did you play a perfect game? Because it looked like to me that after half time, you stopped working as hard. And I'm like, no, I didn't play a perfect game. He goes, then what are you talking about?
Wow.
Just fix that. Just focus on yourself, focus on what you can control. And so that was the same thing when I went into the AFL, is that if anything, Dad would say, geez, you don't look like you've got as much spring in your jump at the moment. You're just not jumping as hard for the ball as you have in previous times. Or you've changed your goal kicking routine. Why'd you do that? Because it was really, it was really working for you. I kicked 47 goals, 10 as a bottom age player in the TAC Cup. So things like that would be the only input that he'd ever give me. He would never, ever tell me where to run, what to do, because he knew that was a coach's job. And he hated parents who got involved, right? And I think I must have mentioned to someone at some stage, hey, and I'm pretty sure I know who it was, one of the coaches. Yeah, my dad said, he said, watching me, my jumping looks differently. And then in the paper the next week, someone's like, they've got fears that Tom's dad is too involved in his career. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Like, that was in the famous Whisper column in the...
Oh, yes.
So, and obviously that, like, no one cares about that. But for me, it meant a lot. And I think that's where, there was a couple of challenges, let's say, with me as an 18-year-old kid, all of the issues associated with a high pick, all of the, confidence / insecurity. There was plenty of things that were my issue that I had to grow up and learn about, and some of which I didn't learn about till after my career. But there was certainly some interesting flows of information and people at that club at that stage as it was just trying to build its infancy.
Well, even speaking of your dad, so we'll move now into probably the famous trade and the influence. And there's some great stories going around of meetings that you had with the Bulldogs and the involvements of your dad. But we were talking actually just before we go into your side. We're talking about the flip side of that time, because I remember that day when Griffin leaves, McCartney goes, and I actually remember just radio here in Melbourne just went into turmoil. The Dogs are stuffed. Like,
Yeah, this is the end.
yeah, literally.
I'll never forget that day.
Yeah. I think we were texting that day too. But talk to us about when those conversations started with the Dogs, or even maybe when you decided you were done with the Giants.
Yeah, so I remember having some issues sleeping sort of mood-wise early in the piece in 2014. So sleep in particular was always a big driver for any of the issues that I had. And I just remember having so much stress around, the issues that some of which I already described, just the feeling of being in Sydney, lack of connection with anyone outside of the footy club. It was just so insular. And I've always wanted my own space and wanted a spread of friends. It's always been something that's really worked for me. In particular, when I remember going through my juniors at Eastern and playing Vic and AOS and all that sort of stuff, I loved having friends at school who just treated me normally. It was a really important thing for me. And they used to beat me in school at times, and that was a fun competition to have because it was all in my control, right? Footy's always got a bit of variation and variability. And I remember during that initial period, just the concept of mental health and it wasn't called that back then. It was called homesickness at that stage. And they sort of, rightly or wrongly, everyone basically said, you're just homesick. Everyone goes through it. Just forget about it. And it'll go away. All the boys deal with it at some stage. And look at them. They're all so happy now. I'm like, we haven't won a game for the year. They can't be that happy. And right around that period of time, so this must have been around 7 or 8, somewhere around there. At that stage, we had 2 buys during the year. Best model ever. Tell you what, it was like play 8 games, week off. Play 8 games, week off. Play 7 games, finals. It was awesome. So easy to break the year up rather than doing 5 rounds, buy, 20 rounds to go.
Yeah.
It was just so different the second year, obviously, besides the point. But in and around one of those buys, my dad calls me on a Thursday afternoon and he goes, you've got a contract offer. And the Giants had already offered me an extension, great money. It was in January, hadn't played a game, 2 more years, 4 years at the Giants, set. And I'd said no. I just said, let's just wait till the end of the year. And the main reason was I'd been there for probably 6 weeks. I had confidence that it wasn't going to go away, right? Whether I played well in that first year or not was sort of not that relevant, given I was a number 1 pick, key forward. They don't grow on trees is always what they used to say back in the draft days. Big guys don't grow on trees.
Is that normal, though? Is it actually normal for a high draft pick to get a contract offer that early?
Yeah, a lot of them get it on draft night.
Yeah, okay.
So it's it used to be the 2+1. So you do the 2-year draft contract, and a lot of guys would basically sign these automatic extensions for a 3rd year.
Yep.
And essentially, they'd be 2.5x what you'd get as a base.
Yeah, okay.
So you'd do 2 years at 100, and you get 250 as a base for the 3rd or something like that. Sometimes a bit more. And anyway, they offered me that extension. I was like, no, I want to wait to the end of the year. Quite a rational thought process. It was I've got 2 years. I don't know what it's like living in Sydney. Don't know what it's like playing here. Never played a game of AFL football. A lot of unknowns. Why would I sign on for 2 seasons when I've got options? Again, regardless what happens in that first 2 seasons, someone would offer me a deal, being a number 1 pick and being a key forward. And so when Dad called me, I was like, I'm not re-signing with the Giants. Just leave me alone, sort of thing. And he goes, it's not from the Giants. I'm like, great. Who's it from? And it's Dad's a smart guy. Dumbest thing he's ever said to me in my entire life. He goes, mate, got a big game on the weekend. Don't want you to think about it. just prepare for the game, play well. I'm coming up on the weekend to watch, and we'll catch up on Sunday.
Who is he, your manager?
I'm like, Dad, how stupid shit is this? And anyway, he came up. We met at the Palace Hotel, and he told me that the Bulldogs had offered me this deal. He goes 7 over 7. I go $700,000 a year over 7 years. Quick math. Did well at school. That's almost $5 million. So I'm thinking about Land Cruisers and all sorts of stuff. What colours they're going to be, or whatever. And he goes, no, 7 million over 7 years. And at that stage, that would make me, I think, the 3rd highest paid player in AFL history, behind Lance Franklin and Gary Ablett Jr., which is unfortunate for Scott Pendlebury because then he could have made the foursome of the Gatorade bottles from the start.
That's it.
Even though I'm pretty sure he was on a good pay packet then anyway, so Scott wasn't starving. So then we go through, great, well, where's the contract? How do I sign it? I'd sign a napkin if I could have at that stage. Obviously, predominantly, and I'm very open. Life-changing money, it was the absolute number 1 driving factor between me coming home was there is this huge financial reward to set you up for life. It's not complicated. There was also the added element of, how I said earlier, players will not give up all their money for success, but they will not go somewhere for a club that they don't deem to be successful. similar in the same thought process was, I'm not actually enjoying my time at the Giants here, and so I don't have a reason to stay at this moment. And equally, I saw the future ahead of me, and whether this was the right thought or not, Jeremy Cameron was a superstar already. He kicked 69 goals the year before I got there, as in a team that finished on the bottom of the ladder. Wasn't going to knock him out of the side. John Patton had a 2-year advantage on me from a size, shape, and fitness point of view. And then they had all these sort of hybrids. And to me, it was like being the number one key forward makes a lot of sense. So that was also another part. And essentially, obviously, I couldn't sign the deal at the restaurant that day. We went back to Melbourne, and it's just like Cloak and Dagger, like exactly how you imagine it. Well, at least how I imagine these deals used to go down. We met at a cafe, Liam Pickering, my dad, myself. It was a cafe called Hobber. It's at the bottom of Bridge Road. I'm not sure if it's still there. And we had a fake meeting. So funny. So what's our strategy? The strategy is sign the deal. Super complicated. How do we get this done? And then we go, shake hands. See you later, Liam. See you later, Jeff. Just in case anyone in the cafe, like very recognisable figures at this stage. Liam had done all these big deals. He'd done Buddy and so on.
Gaz.
And so we leave. We drive in separate directions and then meet up around the corner and drive into Peter Gordon's underground car park in East Hawthorn in like a motorcade. And, we go in, it's all the big wigs, Jace McCartney, who's the list manager, Brendan McCartney, Simon Garlick, Simon Dalrymple, so CEO Simon Garlick, Simon Dalrymple's the head of recruiting or whatever it was, and Peter. And they go through this whole presentation about the list of the Bulldogs. They're like, these guys are B-grade players today. They're going to be A-grade players tomorrow. And I'm like, I've played with a few of those guys. You also don't have to sell me. Saw the $7 million. Yeah. Pretty confident this club is the right place for me to be.
And it's in Melbourne.
But let's go through the process. It's a bit like match committee, right? We could have just spent the whole time talking about the contract instead of talking about anything else and how we're going to get it done. And then we get all the way to the end, and we're sitting at Peter's sort of dining room table, and we're just talking rubbish, right? Nothing that really mattered, because there's only two questions. How are we going to get this deal done? And how are we going to manage the trade, right? Yep. And anyway, Piggy's got up there and he's like, you got two players that you can trade for Tom. No one else is worth a lick, basically. Which obviously wasn't true, but it was a big deal. And he goes, Ryan Griffin would be one. The Giants would love to have someone of his age and leadership, and he's captain of your club. And they're like, we can't trade our captain. Yeah. Sorry. Second one, Marcus Bontempelli. And at that stage, his nickname was still the Future. So didn't seem like a great call to trade the Future for me. Yeah. And obviously, in retrospect, I reckon they probably did the right thing by not trading him out of the club.
Yes, I think so.
I think, even though he hasn't won a Brownlow yet, much to the dismay of me and everyone else. And so they were basically like, there's no one else to do it, so let's just revisit it. And we literally walked away with a handshake. Oh, yeah, we'll try it next year. Nowhere, no progress. Finish the year, go away overseas. I'm absolutely cooked, because one of the things that happens, particularly if you're a high pick, is you play basically 2 full seasons and the pre-seasons associated in a row. There's no break, because you go into preparation for your draft year. You go straight into training for Combine. We finished as late as we could. We won the Premiership as TAC Cup, straight into Combine like 2 weeks later, straight into prep for pre-season, straight into pre-season, season, and so on. So I was absolutely buggered. And I had all these issues with sleep and other things throughout the year. So I get to the point where I'm like, I just got to get away. And so I went on a surf trip over to this place called the Mentawai Islands, which is in Indonesia off the coast of Sumatra. About as far-fetched place as you can go, so far from anywhere, with no cell reception, nothing. And we had this really dodgy Wi-Fi, and I remember getting this, we were very struggling to connect properly, but we were just reading through the AFL feed. And I see Ryan Griffin has asked for a trade, and you click through the article, and it says to the GWS Giants. Wow. And I'm like, I did not even consider what was going on in Bulldogs land. I was just like, this is all about me, boys. And so I text sort of frantically back and forth over the next couple of hours with my dad and my manager, what are we going to do, yada, yada. And Dad gave me a piece of advice then, I thought was particularly pertinent. He basically said, look, all the best things that I've got in my life today, particularly when that came from business, were things that I doubted that I should do, but came when I was willing to take a risk. And, for the untrained person in this space, it may not seem risky to ask for a big contract like that to go through, but the alternative is really a significant likelihood, which is walk back into a club as a $7 million player, doesn't get paid $7 million. Really tough to wear down. Come back into a club who know you want to leave, and clubs don't see that kindly on that matter. And also basically put a target on your back and the Bulldogs for the entire period. And massive concern this still doesn't go through the next year, so we get all the bad parts and none of the good parts. And with all that being said, again, listen to Dad, threw caution to the wind, and in about 4 minutes flat, the contract size gets leaked after I asked for a trade. I'm over there with Nick Floston, who's a great mate of mine, was one of the groomsmen for my wedding, so he's still playing at Richmond at the moment. He comes back from surfing, reads the headline, and goes, "Mate, you're paying for the rest of the trip." And it was a really rough few 10 days because it was back then when the trade periods were all like 4 months long, it felt like.
Yeah.
And which they've gone back to for no apparent reason.
I know.
Like, what
Just more radio content, Tom. That's all they want.
Oh, it's just
which I love.
The dark days of October when there's nothing to
There's
talk
nothing else to talk
Nothing
about.
Well,
Your old
let's
manager
talk
might
about
have
let's talk
saying
about
that.
how this deal hasn't moved again for the 15th time today and also for the 50th time this week. And as soon as the deal came out, Dave Matthews came out, who's the CEO of the Giants to this day, and he said, categorically, we're not trading Tom. And I actually ran into him in Albert Park around the corner like a couple of years ago or 18 months ago, and he goes, "Tom, you're the only bloke to ever make me a public liar." Because he said, there's no chance. And, I'm like, okay, to be expected, it's a negotiation. We'll see what happens. And for the first few days, Pickers couldn't even get the Bulldogs and the Giants to meet. He's like, the Giants wouldn't even take a phone call. They're just like, we're not doing it. So bad luck. Deal with it. And so after about 4 or 5 days, Pickers calls me or texts me, and he goes, "Gonna have to turn up the heat. Do you mind if I speak on your behalf?" Which is like a crazy thing to say yes to. Anyway, long story short, he essentially comes out, this is paraphrasing, and he goes, he hates the club. He hates the Giants. He hates the players. He'll never come back to Sydney.
Hates the players.
He'd never come back to Sydney if he can avoid it. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. It wasn't exactly what he said.
Yeah.
But he was painting a very clear picture that they had to at least have the discussion, or the risk was that I would walk into the preseason draft in 12 months' time, which I was willing to do, but it was sort of not really a possibility at that moment. So I got them back to the table. A few more days passed by, and I get a text message from Leon, which is like, "Tom, been trying to reach you. It's been a pretty crazy few days. Can't wait for you to come back for a really, really, really big preseason." This is after Liam's already lambasted them in the media. I'm like, how much do you reckon a house in Indonesia is going to cost me? Because I could just move here. Pretty nice. Lots of surf. No issues. It's either this or Breakfast Point at this moment in time where I can't get away from anyone at Breakfast Point and they were all going to hate me. And I'm like, all right, I'm moving to Indonesia. And then on the last night of trade period, which finished, I think, from memory at 2 p.m. on the Friday or the Thursday. So the night before that, text message, 8 o'clock at night. Both clubs have gone home. This deal's going nowhere. And I'm like, oh no. I'm absolutely screwed here. And then at about 11 in the morning, it was 3 hours to go. Literally all Pickers sent me was, it's done. No updates or anything. So I'm freaking out like, what's done? My career? Like, I'm doing time. But obviously the deal had gone through and I became the Western Bulldogs player.
Gosh. I mean, crazy. Absolutely crazy. My first thought goes to, what have you got up there?
How did we go?
The exact trade.
You'll have to read it
my
to us.
eyesight
My
is
eyesight's
terrible.
shocking.
Yep. So Tom Boyd went to the Dogs, pick 6, and Ryan Griffin went to the Giants. So Boydy went to the Dogs, Griffin, pick 6, who ended up being Caleb Marchbank. Who
did Caleb play 63? Here you go. This will test you. Did he play 63 at the Giants, or did he play
the Blues? I think
because he went to the Blues after.
Yeah.
Right.
At the Giants.
Yeah, that would surprise me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have thought he would have played
Well, it was
63 total.
total, yeah.
So the deal goes through. You're $1 million man over 7 years. You go to the Dogs. You're the saviour to many of the Dogs fans. I think about Tom Scully and leaving the D's as the number 1 pick to go to the Giants on a similar kind of wavelength. Did you talk to him at all?
No. Tom, first of all, great bloke. I believe he's a police officer now.
Okay.
I think. I hope I'm not like sharing things I
Yeah.
shouldn't. I think he's great.
Because again, we haven't seen him since he retired.
No,
so,
no, and I think deliberately. Great guy, very serious guy. Very much football. I think similarities in the way that football sort of mentally challenged us in very different ways, but in the it was a heavy burden. And I think no doubt Tom experienced some real challenges playing at Melbourne. I never spoke to him, and this is one of those things, right? Like again, to take it back to the actual specific circumstances. 18-year-old kid, get this offer, got to keep it to myself. Can't tell anyone. Can't tell a single person. Wouldn't even really talk about it with my dad because he didn't want me to get distracted over the course of the year around just focus. Just like, Tom, all you got to do is play good footy. That's all you want. So I'm sitting there going, I've got this secret and I might be able to get out of here at the end of the year, or I'm hoping I can, and my life's going to change forever, but it's 6 months away, or it's 4 months away, it's 3 months away. So you really are on an island at that moment in time, and there's not a single thing that can happen until trade period comes. And until the moment where Griffin put his hand up to come to the Giants, that deal wasn't going through. It wasn't happening. The only reason that deal happened was because of Ryan Griffin. The only reason. And the only reason that happened was in many ways, at least from what has been, he didn't really want to be captain. He was under a heap of pressure and he wanted a fresh start. And to, I suppose, the opposites when it comes to the Skulls and me example is Tom moved from the fishbowl pressure bubble of Melbourne up to the Giants where no one knows him. Right? I did the opposite. I thought I had a lot of pressure when I was in Sydney. Then I moved back down to Victoria. And even as a kid who grew up here, I had no idea the reach that footy had in terms of how, as the centre of attention, you're going to experience that. The simplest example is I came back from Indonesia. The trade's gone through. I'm sitting there walking through the airport thinking there's going to be like 50 paparazzi there. No one there, thank God. Must have thought too highly of myself. Or no one knew. If they knew, they probably would have turned up if I had to guess. About 2 days later, I'm in a meeting in Richmond with a couple of guys who were talking to me about something they wanted to invest in, which also started...
So straight away, there's people coming at you?
Within days. I don't think I'd even signed the deal yet.
Friends?
People I knew.
Yeah.
But it also
Tom,
was good.
I'm thinking of starting up an F45.
It wasn't too...
I need 15 grand.
The F45 would have been a better idea.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I took that first meeting, and then I didn't take any after that. So it was kind of good to his friends. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sitting in this meeting. My back's absolutely killing me. I thought I've had a back spasm, like been on the plane or whatever. And so I'm like sweating, like in agony. And so I drive home, and I went back to Ringwood where my mum and dad are briefly for a couple of weeks there. And I remember I had to do Triple M in the morning, which was a whole nother thing because there was a bit of animosity towards me at that stage about how big the deal was, and this was a new thing, and leaving clubs after 1 year after being picked one. A lot of animosity. Anyway, and I can't sleep, so I go sleepless the whole night in so much pain. Take a couple of anti-inflams to try and settle it down. I think it was with JB and Billy, maybe it was rush hour or whatever the morning equivalent was back then. And I hadn't slept. Did the interview. Go to sleep afterwards. Mum wakes me up at 4 o'clock after she gets home from working at the school. And she goes, "You look horrible." We go to the doctors. And to cut a long story short, I needed my appendix out. I had appendicitis. And I didn't realise. So they rushed me to hospital, called the club. Jake Landsberger, the doctor, the Bulldogs, he's just figuring it all out. And I end up in Epworth. And this is how I knew I'd made it. The hospital goes, "No, we can't fit you in until the morning. This is like 10 o'clock at night." And the guy goes, "We're not waiting. If this bursts, he can get sepsis." And anyway. So
have you physically signed yet at this point? Or you say just before the surgery? Yeah, okay.
I don't know. I think technically I had power of attorney with Liam, so it didn't really matter.
Okay.
And they go, "All right, we're moving you. We're going to open up a hospital." And so I go to Melbourne Private. They open the hospital for me. He flies his whole team in, like flies. They're from Melbourne. And they literally, we walk to the hospital, they're turning the lights on for me.
No receptionist, no one.
No one there. No one. The whole team's been woken up. So you can imagine, like, if you ever watch like those medical shows, all the beepers going off in the middle. Anyway, I get my appendix out, wake up in the morning. Article in The Age. Australia's most expensive appendix has been removed. I'm like, and my mum just about had a heart attack. One, she's like, how did they know?
This is ridiculous.
But two, this is my 18-year-old, actually would have been 19-year-old baby. And I think that was the first glimpse of like, oh, this is going to be a bit different to what we had up in Sydney. So it was a big move.
So it's unbelievable. I'd love to know, just very briefly, like we talked about your first thoughts walking into the Giants. Conversely, what's it like walking into a club for the first time where now it's very public what's gone on? What's that first day like? What are the boys like?
Yeah, it was. So there's a good part and a bad part. One, so I had this appendix issue, which meant I couldn't train and I wasn't that fit when I got there, which wasn't ideal. And so I didn't start on the training track. I basically had all this rehabilitation to do. To get strong and all that sort of stuff. You can't lift with an appendix. You get a risk of basically tearing the incision and all that sort of stuff. And also, because I'd gone away when I'd gone to Indonesia, then come back. I really hadn't done any running because basically my cheat code in the off season, if you could call it that, was I'd go and surf for 2.5 weeks and get really lean and fit and tanned and then come back, start running when I got back and run with a light.
Were you a good runner?
Nah, oh God, no, no. I didn't become any good at running until a couple of years after I got to the Bulldogs, and then I sort of varied depending on injuries and stuff. And but the good part was and this is gonna sound strange unless you've been to this, the smell, the smell of the footy club. I could smell deep heat. I could smell the mud and all of that stuff, and I could walk into a place that had been it was weathered.
Yeah, there's history.
There was history there. EJ's out at front. Rowan Smith's the assistant coach. He's got his Legends banner on the wall. I've seen Brad Johnson. He's a great fella. I've seen him. He's on the wall. Luke Darcy's, I'm not sure if he was on the board yet, but he was around the place. And I'm like, oh no,
sorry.
This is a real footy club. And that's what it felt like walking in. And I think for me, it was such a change. And to be honest, we'd come off a year where the club was obviously struggling on the field at the Giants, and I didn't have a coach for the first month at the Bulldogs, so I arrived before Bevo. And Bevo walked in, and one of the first things that he did is he came on the first year's camp to Torquay. So he came down there was me and Joel Hamling and Shane Biggs, who had taken in as trades. And I can't remember, it must have been Toby McLean in his year maybe.
Toby, Caleb, Bailey Dale.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're the younger than me. So they come in. And we all went down and we stayed in Darien Road in Torquay, which I actually had friends live on that street. I'd been there before. Yeah. I was like, this is great. And he was so good. He was so relatable. Didn't even really talk footy. He was so positive. And I was like, oh, this is just completely different. And I remember him sitting me down and he basically listed up 10 key forwards in the league. And he goes, this guy takes 2 contested marks a game. This guy takes 1.8. He goes, Tommy, I watched all your junior footage. If you take 2 marks, contested marks for the rest of the game, you're going to be the best contested mark in the comp. That's all we're going to work towards. And I was like, oh, that seems easy. I can do that. Turned out it was a bit harder than just writing it on a whiteboard. But the other thing he did is that he walked in and he goes, I've got no predetermined concept of what you are as players. I'm going to just help you reach your best. And the one example I always give is Liam Picken. Liam Picken had been a scragger for 5 years, 6 years. And no one had even considered that he could be a positive offensive influence in the league. And he comes in and goes, Liam, you've got so much more to offer. And he becomes a powerhouse winger midfielder who kicks goals and was genuinely one of the most impactful players in the competition for a couple of years there. And he did the same with all of us. And the other thing he did was he goes, you guys are all fit enough. Broadly speaking, you need to learn how to play footy my way. And so all we did for pre-season basically was just play.
Yeah.
And the lightness of that place to walk into was honestly the best part of my journey into the Bulldogs. Was this is a real footy club. It's got a coach who believes in us and a coach who believes that footy should be fun. As much as this is a serious game with lots on the line, at the end of the day, it is still a game and one that we want to play for the enjoyment of it, if nothing else.
You see Bevo really back his players. His club and his people are so important to him. You can see it in the media, of recent times when there's been criticism from outside
Very recent times.
Very recent, obviously.
I think it's about 4 days ago.
Very recent. You see that from the outset, us as the public, but is he like that inside the four walls? You can really tell how much he really tries to protect you.
Yeah, he does, and I think to a fault at times. Like there were moments where Bevo's combativeness, at least from my perspective, put a target on my back. It wasn't intentional from him, but because he was so bullish on protecting me, it meant that he caused conflict with certain members of the media. Certain members of the media go, well, Bevo's not going to care if we criticise him, but he will care if we criticise Tom or other players for that matter. And there was a bunch of those that happened over the journey. And I think that's part of the thing. And the way I would describe it is that the media sacks every coach eventually. The ones who last a long time, like the Sheedies and even the Clarko and those types, they kind of like massage their way through, if you know what I mean. They play the game. Whereas the ones who have been more combative tend to feel the weight of it a bit more. And I think Bevo felt the weight for a few years. I mean, I think, particularly at this stage in my life, I try and be as objective as I can be. I would say there's been no coach who's ever made as big an impact as Bevo has in those first 2 seasons. And I mean that from a footballing point of view and an organisational point of view, where he walked in and changed the face of a club that had been very negative and destitute at times, where they, in times further in the past had basically gone broke or never thought they were going to really get to the top of the top, never thought they were going to win a premiership. If you're Bulldog supporters, you obviously know the story far too well. He didn't believe any of that. He unshackled all of that from the playing group at the very least, if not from the supporters and the club as a whole. Unbelievably difficult to do and a beacon of success when he first got there. But I think there was also times post that period where he felt the weight and the pressure of needing to back up the premiership in 2016. And pressure builds fear, and fear builds control, and control ends up being basically micromanaging and those types of things. And I'm not saying that that's Bevo's whole story at all. But if you look to him this year and you see the lightness that the players of the Bulldogs are playing with this year, and the growth in our younger team members in particular, you go, he's back on that train. And I think that is incredibly evident. And not to mention that during the period between 2016 and now, he also made a premiership in 2021. And he will go down as the greatest coach in Bulldogs history. But like any coach, it doesn't mean he's perfect. But what I will say is, as I said before, that the greatest impact that any coach that I've ever seen make on a footy club as a whole was the work that he did in those 2 years in particular, as he walked into a club that was in a complete shambles and turned the whole ship around and turned it into, frankly, a powerhouse who has, not gotten to the heights of the Richmonds and the Collingwoods and the Hawthorns, but has certainly gapped the teams that would have been considered on par with us when he first arrived 10 years ago, which I think is evident in every metric that's available. So, lucky to know him. Lucky to have been coached by him, particularly around that era where we were incredibly successful.
I mean,
I don't want this to stop.
No, neither do I. I mean, we have to ask one though. I mean, we do have to touch on it because otherwise the doggies and uffies will come after us. But I mean, we.
He keeps using the word nuffies.
I know.
These people are the people who support the game.
I know.
You're right.
Die hard.
You know how much he really teases me for being passionate about the Bulldogs, don't you?
That's an off-air conversation. It's
Well,
only because there's just certain behaviours that, I just think you should grow out
wearing
of.
footy jumpers to the footy.
Obviously, I'm not doing
quite.
that.
It's not quite that. Face painting he still does.
No, I don't.
I'm kidding. But it's just more like online forums.
I don't do that either.
Online forums.
I don't do that.
I'm joking. I'm actually
they're a
taking the piss.
dangerous place to be.
Yeah, it's very dangerous.
It started my experience in the online forums at the Big Footy.
Oh, Big Footy?
Yeah.
Because they used to focus on the up-and-coming draft, and it was just like...
I mean, I must say I have Googled Western Bulldogs Zach Butters on Big Footy recently.
Oh, yeah, of course.
To see if he's
if
potentially
you're
coming
just feeling
to
a
the
bit
Dogs.
down
Yeah.
or you want to feel
Like, is he going to come to the Dogs?
I think Dos actually holds a record at the Bulldogs as the oldest person ever to partake in a segment called Ask Andreas. Andreas Everett back in the day.
You're bringing this up again.
They'd have kids writing in.
Yeah.
Pretty much between the ages of 5 and 8, and then
did when
still
he
you
was-
could Google it and you can find Wade 14, which is
right.
about double
That's
the
not
age
that-
of
that's
anybody.
still-
It's not too
not
bad.
bad,
It's good.
Yeah,
but
some of us mature later.
exactly right.
But I'll also say, on a slightly more serious note, when it comes to quote-unquote nuffies, is I do think that there is like a slight lack of respect to the wonderful supporters of the game,
Yes.
who, notwithstanding, are probably supporters of your show.
Yes,
Exactly,
yes.
right?
I say nuffies in the most affectionate way possible.
Yeah, and I always say
I don't say
this.
it's a negative. I'm just saying it's a
No, I
yeah.
know. I'm not just staring. I think I think it actually, and this is something that comes back to the way footy clubs are run, is that they need to show respect for their members. And I mean that at every level, right?
Yeah.
Any committee on board or anyone else who's running these places who thinks it's about them and not about the people who support the place, always go astray every single time. And I think, it's something I've had to learn because I probably thought, I'm not saying you think this. I was. It's really difficult when you're playing and you're experiencing this very high volume of high intensity conversations with supporters of the club.
Of course.
But in my later years, as I approach 30 in a few months, I very much have an enormous amount of respect, particularly for the Bulldog supporters who have made our club, supported our club, kept our club alive. And they deserve to be treated with respect in the way that they're communicated to and message about how the club's going and all that sort of stuff. So, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It happens by and large. But, let's just say there's not all supporters, but most.
That's very well.
Well, you were going to
said.
ask about the grand
Well, I
final.
was just going to ask. I mean, I was going to say the goal. We all know the goal. I was going to say you're probably sick of it. I'm sure you're probably not sick of it.
Not sick of it.
Um,
If I could set it as my screensaver on my phone, I would. But
haven't you got that?
No.
So, you are a
People
family.
send it to me enough.
You are a family man now. But
Yeah, it is
we'll
my
go
daughter,
on. He's
actually.
got it up. We may as well click.
There's only one version. You can watch.
Okay, go on. Former guest of the show. Chuck him on.
Gobbled up here by the Swans. Handball comes out to Callum Mills. He looks back inside with a sizzling little low drop punt. Here's Buddy Franklin knocked away by Morris. Couldn't mark it. Naismith Kennedy handball out to Buddy. Buddy tackled by Morris. Dropping the ball. Boyd took the advantage and played
It's a long way out.
from inside
Mate,
the
it's a
centre
long way
square. Boyd's kicked a goal. Boyd's kicked a goal from inside the centre. Fuck.
It just doesn't.
Boyd's kicked a goal.
It gets better every time you hear that.
And there's you just play it a little bit more.
My favourite is Spuds.
Listen.
Can you believe that?
It's Luke Darcy going, because you got to remember,
Yeah.
the context of this is that the week before Luke Darcy's crying in the commentary box.
The prelim,
In
yeah.
the prelim. And, this is the moment that undoubtedly he's going, my club is actually going to win a flag.
Yeah.
And he comes in with he's dropped the magic.
Yeah.
And look, Darcy's such a wonderful bloke, and his son's not bad at footy either. which
No,
is
he's
also
pretty
is
good.
helpful.
No, he's pretty
He's
good.
pretty good. What's your recollections of the week after that?
Not a lot. It's really interesting. Two polar opposites are the biggest memories. One, family day at the club the next day, like walking on stage in the upper balconies of the administrative part of the club's facilities at the time, in front of 40,000 people, red, white and blue, huge cutouts of my face the size of a car door floating around. Very, very nice things to see. Unbelievable. Like, genuinely probably the first real respect that I had for what we do as athletes, especially for Aussie rules players, but certainly across the NRL and other codes as well, and what it means to people. That was the first real, maybe I should stop thinking about myself so much. Didn't really start doing that until a bit later, but that was number one. Number two is there's this photo that we showed. So I do a podcast with Danny McGinlay called The Danny Boyd Show, which I never plug. So Danny, I'll send you this clip and make you feel better about
That's it.
where there's a photo of a fan who was flying back in from Memphis the day after the grand final. And as they come in to do the big bank around the western suburbs to Mustby landing from the south, they can see the oval and they take a photo out of the airplane window. And it's like there's a heart of blue and then the veins of the blue for everyone still walking in down the streets of Footscray because there's no parking. And it's just like, what have we... I just kicked a footy around. That's all. But it means a lot to people. And there's 1,000 conversations I've had subsequent to that around, I'm a lifelong sufferer of Western Bulldogs and never thought I'd get there. Watched EJ play, I'm 80 years old. Never thought I'd see one before I die, and now I can die happy and all that amazing stuff. Unbelievable part to be a part, and very much the pinnacle of that post-grand final period. That day was by far and away the best. On the other side, I also remember having a run-in with a member of the coterie at the grand final, or the best and fairest on the Wednesday, where I was walking out. I was absolutely cooked. We'd been obviously out drinking, and if we weren't there, we're at the club doing rehab and exit interviews and signings. It was a packed few days.
Would have been a lot of signing.
Yeah, like you're talking 4 or 5 hours straight of signing jumpers, and it was a nightmare. Hungover as. And we were basically getting ready to, I was leaving with my wife, or now wife at the time. And to be honest, she'd been really poorly treated by a few fans that night who were very eager to get photos and knocked aside and like forced to take photos.
Yeah.
She didn't need that in her life. It wasn't a very nice experience for her. Not that she has any hard feelings about it. She knows why it happened. But then on the way out, a coterie group member or someone who has been involved in the club basically grabbed me, said, let's get a photo. I never thought you were any effing good, and you finally did something, basically. He'd had a few drinks. And I was like, have we not done enough here? Like, I didn't have all of the stats in my head about the 62 years or the 7 loss prelim. I didn't have that in my head at the time, but it certainly felt like we'd done something really important for the club. And I'd obviously played the game of a lifetime. I had the moment of the game, arguably one of the great moments of grand final history, and I was still getting this same negative stuff from a member of the club who should have known better. And those are the two sort of bookend memories. And I think it's probably a bit of a tale of what happened over the next couple of years. Like, this is the issue. It's the greatest part about footy, which is the people involved, and it's also the worst part about it. And to the point I made earlier about trying to find the balance between the mismatch between what you think of yourself as a person and what you're being told. Again, I'm 29 now. I couldn't care less about what these types of people say. But you only get to learn how to do that by unfortunately suffering through it the first time and realising it's not conducive to a successful and happy life. And at the time, as a 21-year-old, 21-year-old, 22, that meant a lot to me. And it was really difficult to deal with, particularly after the absolute high that I just had. And within, I leave that week with that in my head. I go to get surgery on my shoulder on the Monday afterwards. 2 weeks later, I'm getting surgery on my ankle. And before you know it, you're back at the footy club ready to start again.
Yeah.
And, many of the issues that I'd faced off the field around sleep and anxiety and later depression were all starting to come roaring back really quickly. And to the point I made earlier about all of us, I think there was a mountain to climb that we'd never even considered that we'd have to, which was going up the same one again, now with everyone else trying to stop us getting there. And, that alongside a huge amount of injuries at the end of the year. I think we had 26 or 7 surgeries. Like, there was a lot going on at the club. I think it just led to a heavy weight on everyone's shoulders rather than the lightness that we'd experienced over those 2 years as we headed into 2017. That's for coaches, players alike, I'd say.
Now, we're about to jump into a couple of really fun segments, and we'll mention those in a minute. But I just quickly sent something to Sammy, and I want to share this because you mentioned the impact that that win has had on so many different people, and I just wanted to share my personal experience. So, Sammy, if you want to get that up. So, basically, I'm a lifelong Doggy supporter. D jokes about it. We have a laugh. Love the club. So, my old man, he had an events management business, a lot of connections in the footy space. And one of those was Paul Hudson, he managed Paul. So Paul was playing for the Dogs, and I was a little kid, and Dad was his manager, and I used to get to go in the rooms, and we lost a few of those prelims, like 97, 98. And then obviously went through all those, I think it was 08, 09, 010 prelims. They lost those as well. And Dad would take me to all the games, and those prelims in particular, just walking out, especially one 2009 against the Saints, who he goes for. And I was 14, and I remember walking back to the car in tears. And then obviously a lot of years of hardship under Brendan McCartney, building the foundations, what you guys ended up doing. But so just before September, my dad got diagnosed with cancer. And from diagnosis to death, it was 8 weeks until he passed away. But right before the final started, this is when we found out. And he was in hospital for that West Coast game, and he came out and we spent a bit of time together, and he went back into hospital for the Hawthorn game. I watched it in there with him, and And then that's where we found out he didn't have long. And then he was in palliative care, and the prelim was on, and we were all together, and a few of his mates, and the prelims just a winner prelim would have been just the best, and for all of us to be together and watch that and was crazy. And then Terry Wallace is a close family friend, and he actually got us a couple of tickets, and I didn't want to take them. I said, I don't want to go to the grand final unless my dad can come. And Terry was very adamant. He was like, no, you're going. And a couple of other people said, no, you have to go. So that's me and my mum. And a stranger took that photo. A complete stranger saw me just, tears in my eyes. And the whole monumental, part of it wasn't that we won, but it was going through what we were going through as a family. And then he passed away 2 days later. So he watched it in hospital with my sister and one of his good mates, Brett Lovett, and my uncle as well. But it meant so much to so many people, and I know you've probably heard so many stories like that. But it was just, we talked about it this morning. It's just hard to believe it happened at times, and just thank you, mate, because it brought me a lot of joy, and it probably brought me a lot of comfort too in a pretty shitty time, and it'll live with me forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thanks for sharing. It is a story that I've heard a few times from different people. Like there were more than one Bulldogs tragic who literally hung on just to see that game that we've heard of over the years. And I think this is why there is a really interesting, to use a fancy word, dichotomy between football being a game that we should all enjoy for the fun of it, but it also being so much more than that to so many people, and the circumstance that it creates in lives where it is a huge component of people's relationships with others, whether it be friends, family, or just strangers. And I think that the magic of sport comes back to the purpose that it serves in people's lives. And a great example of that is obviously a huge part of the relationship you have with your dad, and what it means for our clubs to struggle and struggle and struggle and finally achieve the thing that we all deem to be the most important, which is the success on the last day in September or the first day, Saturday in October in this example. And I think that's why sport has such power to move people, and that's why, in many ways, the conversations that happen around the league that some people perhaps don't understand of what the league means, what it should be representing, and the work that it should be doing around 1,000 different social causes, and then obviously most recently with regards to the mental health side of things, is the game means so much to so many people, and it has a absolutely unbelievable effect on the connection it can build in a community, in a family, in a country like it does. And that's why maximising its reach, number one, so that as many people get to enjoy our great game as they can is paramount. But number two is the meaning that comes through that reach, and the ability for people to leverage the game for bigger reasons is something that I'll always be a big proponent for.
Where are we jumping into now, mate?
Well, now we've got to shift gears. No. I've just been enjoying this chat.
I know, me too. I kind of don't want it to end.
I know, we don't want it to end. That's what sucks about sometimes time restraints.
The batch recordings.
But, exactly right. But we did say to you, Tom, that we're going to do a segment on behalf of our good friends at Rexel. Now, before we talk a little bit about Rexel and their app, this might be a company, I won't say close to your heart because that's pushing words down your throat, but especially when it comes to all things electrical. Your dad, you said, is a Sparky.
He is. Big electrical contracting company. So obviously Rexel must be the good one at the moment.
Yeah. I'm sure he's popped his head into a Rexel store over the years.
But you know what we're more interested in, Tom?
I'm certain. I didn't do any pre-work and ask him.
No, that's okay. I'm certain he has.
But we're more interested in how you'd go on the tools, by the way.
Dad once sent me off looking for a left-handed hammer, and I'm still looking.
The old classic.
Oh, mate, that is... no good. Terrible. Dad can fix anything. I can't fix anything at all. And most of the time, he goes, Tom, I need your help. And I stand there holding a box of screws or something. It's quite demeaning. So,
well, do you want to tell a little bit about Rexel?
Yeah, well, this segment, it's the Rexel shocking confession booth. So Rexel, they're Australia's leading electrical wholesale, have been for over 100 years, and they have stores all around the country.
They do 127, to be precise, Dos, with their extensive product range. You can see them pretty much on any corner.
And they've got their new Rewired app, so to bring you a seamless experience. All the Sparkies out there are loving this faster, easier, and smarter app to use.
Yes, so you can enjoy a streamlined homepage, explore products with their offline catalogues, scan items directly into your basket using their barcode scanner, and discover a range of innovative time-saving features for all the Sparkies.
Go and download that on Apple or Google as well. And they've also got a new chatbot that works 24/7. So with the latest tech, provide you with all-round support and useful information. It makes it easy for you to use the app.
So make sure all you Sparkies download the Rexel Rewired app. And, of course, if you're a partner of a Sparky or know a Sparky, encourage them as well. But this segment is now shocking confessions. You can see what we did there with the clever wordplay. I was very impressed. So we asked you to go away and have a thought about what you could confess in this confession booth. Now, this can be anything you like, Tom. It doesn't have to be serious. It could be serious.
It's not going to be serious.
Okay,
Could be footy related.
It could be anything. Just something that you that might
Something
be
no one knows.
Someone that potentially no one knows. It could be a guilty pleasure. It could be anything. We'd love to know what you've got for us.
Yeah, it's a. I actually was going to say a different one, but I think it sort of ended up coming out in the conversation. So the one that perhaps I didn't want to say. Obviously, my career was. I like to describe it as unique, littered with the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And there's a great quote from a fantastic show called Landman. I don't know if you've seen it on Paramount. No. It's awesome. It's about basically the oil riggers in Texas. And the statement is our industry is one filled with constant crisis and rare but incredible moments of success. And that's essentially what my career was. It was like constant crisis with a couple of really good moments. Yeah. So I take it to heart quite a lot. And when I heard that, I was like, this is bang on. And the reason why I bring that up is the confession is that specific moment of success obviously involves the goal on Grand Final Day on October 1st, which has been shown either directly by me or by other people to a huge range of audiences. Mostly after a couple of beers, it'll come on.
So you don't open your talks with it.
I do.
Oh, yeah,
as
good.
well.
Okay, good.
Yeah. This is more of a highlights package for the talk. I want to
Montage.
remind people, I'm not the real sort of fitness freak I used to be. And you've got to show people that, yes, I could take a specky on a ruckman's head and kick a goal from outside. Well, used to call it 60. It's getting closer to 70 when I tell the story.
That's
It'll be from half back by the time I'm in my 60s. So very, very consistently and bringing up this group of highlights, regardless of company, which is not a great thing to do. Obviously, you should be more humble than that. I'm not.
No, I love it.
Fair enough.
And it also may or may not have been shown to one of the biggest country western singers in the world, which you'll have to go digging on my social media to figure out who that was. So yes, it is a confession that this video has reached far and wide, usually by my hand.
I like that.
So how did this conversation come about?
It was a wedding.
It was a wedding. And I just want to know where you get from point A to point B, where it comes from G'day, I'm Tom.
Well, it's a good question. In this example, it actually wasn't me who brought it up, would you believe? But I was sitting opposite this guy, and obviously he was from the US, so he didn't have a huge idea about, let's say, AFL football. And the guy next to him was a good man of mine. He goes, have a look. So, yeah, it's very funny. It's a good way to take it.
So it's a well-known person. If we look it up, we'll find it.
It's on your Instagram.
It's on your Instagram.
Yeah, well, you'll have to piece a few things together, but one of the biggest in the world.
Yeah. By the time we're able to chop this clip up, I think boys will do some digging and we should hopefully get an accurate response.
But see, then I don't have to stand behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Very smart. Well done.
Very
You're
smart.
too smart for us.
But mate, as a thank you for coming on the show as well. Now, I don't know if you've heard. Have you heard about the viral pistachio Dubai chocolates?
Oh, yeah. Not really, but yes, I've heard of something about it.
It's going viral at the moment. Anyway,
At the moment?
Yeah.
I thought it was more like a viral, 6
It's
months
viral
ago.
all the time.
Yeah, it's always viral. It's always viral. Well,
Imagine how far behind we are.
it's definitely the first I've heard of this. No, I'm joking. Rexel going to send you home with some, mate. So it's a big thank you for because they're rarer than rocking horse shit, aren't they? To get onto
That's
these
one of your
chocolates.
favourite quotes.
We can't get them anywhere. So Rexel managed to get some for you. But of course, we also have the dos&d goodie bag that Sammy's going to bring over as a bit of a thank you. Sammy, where are we going to start? We got a few.
This is like TAC Cup Future Stars.
Oh, yeah, with Terry and Nate Brown.
Yeah, I hosted it once.
ya?
So I did like a panel as a 7
Here we
or
go.
8-year-old.
So
we're
first
gonna
we've
start
got
with
Sup. So
Brand new.
these are brand new, Boydy. So our friends from Sup are sending you home with some high-performance gummies from their high-performance gummy range. They're leading the way in all things performance gummies. I've never had a
Fantastic.
performance gummy, but I'm looking forward to trying one.
Yeah.
Visit supplements.com now to shop. Use the code dos&d for 30%.
Yes.
30% off.
30% off. It's huge.
Store wide. So find us at Coles, Woolworths, select Chemist Warehouse stores as well. And of course, online using the code dos&d, you get the 30% off.
Which flavour looks good over there?
So
for
we've
you?
got L-carnitine, creatine, pre-workout.
It's a bit easier these days, right?
Yeah,
Back in the
I know.
day, if you gave me these, I would have to send them off to get batch tested.
Yes,
True.
It's
exactly
actually
right.
a thing.
We'll
Sammy,
go the Mitch Dowd
Yeah,
now.
bring over the Mitch Dowd first, Sammy, if that's all right. So, of course, now Mitch Dowd, they always look after our guests. Our wonderful friends at Mitch Dowd are sending you home with some of their unbeatable boxes, super cool designs, and they're super soft. It's time to have some fun in your pants, Tom. And now you can check them out, dos&d viewers at mitchdowd.com.au. Now get this, use the code dos&d40 for 40%
Undo that bow,
off.
Tom, and should he
I
open the box?
like
Yeah,
this.
go-
This
open-
is the unfortunate narcissism that comes with being an ex-AFL footballer. I was just assessing whether this top one would anything to do with me. Nah, but I think so.
Well, I see footies. I see in Australia.
It's
a box.
sport. So they've tried to align, some
yeah,
type
I know.
of sport with
so,
it.
but here's my thing. There's always the opportunity to do a
Tom Boyd
Tom
special.
Boyd kicks a goal on the socks.
We will talk to our friends at Mitch Dowd and
And when it's
Imagine-
up, dos&d 40 for 40% off store wide
Get
at Mitch
amongst
Dowd. So, seriously, I mean, I know the boys behind the cameras and mics here. They've made the most of it, haven't you, Sammy? You've used that code to death, I've heard. Presents for family. I've heard a lot of feedback recently that a lot of dads of the dos&d listeners are getting Mitch Dowd as birthday presents, but we recommend that. We can't recommend it enough. So big thank you to Mitch Dowd and, of course, Russell Athletic too.
And next up, we've got the Milkman. So the Milkman, Tom, are leading the way in all things men's grooming co. So milkmanaustralia.com. Head there, use the code dos&d for all things men's grooming. You get, is it 20%
20%
off?
off.
20%
Very
off
generous.
from Milkman. Really, really generous. So you've got the natural deodorant pack. So I think there's about 4 or 5 different
Five
natural-
in there.
Five.
All different, I was about to say flavours, all different scents.
Yeah.
for
weighty as well.
What's that?
Weighty.
Oh,
Which
well, that's what
indicates
you
quality.
that's what you
Yeah,
love.
exactly right. Gee, Tommy's a good salesman. And
He
then I
is.
think they're also sending you home with some of their world famous shaving gel too, as
Oh, that's
well, which is
always
nice and nice and
Thanks,
smooth.
Bill. I only just
Really
started shaving with
Oh,
a razor very
really?
recently. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
is
all
it?
too hard.
Are you
for
so you're not an electric razor guy?
No.
Oh.
No, I was forever until about.
That's me.
I'm the same.
A month
no,
ago.
I'm the
I always
you-
have giggle when I walk. We used to live together, and I'd walk into the bathroom, and he'd be covered in shaving cream.
mate. Milkman, look after me.
Well, to be honest, we can see whose face looks better right now. So
True. Not freshly shaved either.
And then just bring out the rest of the goodie bags. So in there, Tommy, you don't have to go through this, but we've got some from our good friends at our naming right partners, Fleet Plant Hire Solutions. They're sending you home with some golf goodies. I think there's some Tour Edge in there for you too, mate. So golf gloves, tees, balls, everything to look after you on the golf course, mate. Which, of course, all the dos&d listeners and viewers know about. That's just a bit of our way of saying thank you for joining us on the show, mate, because we know how busy you are. You're all over the place. You're doing great things. And I think before we go, because I know you're talking a lot about this, and especially with everything that's happened with the Selwood family of recent of weeks and months, maybe talk a little bit about the mental health round that you're particularly pushing the petitions for.
yeah, so I think first and foremost, losing one life to suicide is too many. It's been something that's been an issue for far too long. It's growing in terms of its reach and scope every year. And I am someone who obviously has very publicly suffered significant issues mentally in the past. It's something that I share across hundreds of different gigs across the country every single year, whether it be with the partnership I have with WorkSafe, Movember, Reclink, the Bulldogs Community Foundation, or any number of other businesses that book me to come out and speak. There is an opportunity, I think, within the AFL to use their scope to make a real impact in this space. And I think it's broken down into 2 really key areas. If nothing else but happens in this space and the AFL continues to grow on their current growth plans to get 1 million participants by the year 2033, which they've announced $1 billion of investment towards, that will be a massive net positive in the mental health space. Every time that someone puts on a jersey, pulls on a pair of boots to play Aussie rules football is a chance that they will connect with other people, be part of a community that's bigger than just themselves, and they won't have to go through life's problems on their own. That's number one. Number two, given that fact and given that they are already within 530 or 40,000 participants, there was something in the paper this morning about the growth, particularly in female footy and participation, the youth side of the game. They have an unbelievable, unrivaled network and community of people across the country where partners in the space of preventative mental health in particular are screaming out for those captive audiences that they do have. And so for me, the mental health round seeks to do three things, which I think has been misconstrued. One is to celebrate the work that has been done and to show the impact that efforts that the AFL and the partners that would be associated have done in the past to actually make a positive impact in this space. Number two, it's to remember why we're fighting the fight that we are and the people that we've lost, and to remind ourselves that there's still more work to be done. And number three is to show what that work is and to show the commitment that the AFL has and the broader community surrounding the footy world has to working on the issues that they can support through the game, not as an aside to the game, through the game, in the years to come. And I think within those three things, there is more impact to be made in a way that frankly is simple and a win for everyone. And I hear criticisms of what the game might mean. To me, that's what it means, and that's what it should represent, and that's how it should be run. And I think if it is run that way, it'll change lives as of the first day that it gets announced all the way through to the final game that it's played. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things where, as a country, we need to contend with the fact this issue is getting worse, not better. It's one that has affected all of us in some way, shape or form, whether it be personally or with people around us, and it's something that, you know, I'll never stop talking about because I've seen that there can be a positive outcome, but so often there isn't. And that's why we need to keep working on it.
Yeah, we commend you for really pushing it for all of us, because you know you've obviously have a voice, and there are so many people out there that need this, and we all do. But mate, just thanks so much for your openness, not only around that, but around everything that you shared today. It was such an awesome chat. Could have gone for another half an hour to 2 hours, I reckon.
Might be the longest one we've ever done.
Yeah, mate, absolutely.
Well, I'm already late for the next meeting. So.
Anyway, sorry about that. Whoever it's with, tell them dos&d. It was dos&d.
Yeah, that's it.
But mate, it was an absolute ball, and congratulations on everything. And even I briefly mentioned to you off air, but reading your book, learning a lot more about yourself and your upbringing, I found it really, really interesting. And mate, just congratulations on everything you've achieved.
Thank you. It's not too difficult to read and still in bookstores. It was written by an ex-footballer, so small words.
And how do we, what's it called again? Just one more plug.
Which part? You can book me to speak. Obviously, I'm really keen the mental health round kicks off. There's a petition on my socials around signing that. That'd be great for all the support that we can get.
Nowhere to Hide, it's called.
Nowhere to Hide is the book.
Yeah.
It's been out for a couple of years. So yeah, I think it's really interesting, worth reading.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, leave a little comment for Tom. Hope you enjoyed the episode.